Good afternoon, good morning. It's Mark Johnson from Loyalty360. Hope everyone's happy, safe, and well. I want to welcome you back to another edition of Loyalty Live. In this series, we talk to the leaders in the customer channel and brand loyalty space about the technology, trends, and best practices that impact the brand's ability to drive unique experience, engagement, and most importantly, customer loyalty. In the month of June, we embarked on a mini-series for our Loyalty Live sessions looking at the evolving trends in customer experience and how brands can meet and exceed these changing customer expectations to achieve more loyal brand advocates in the months and the years to come. So the best part about this is we talk to individuals like Marlon, who is the CEO of HTK, and they have great experience in developing and running these programs, and they're on the front lines with their customers in truly helping evolve the customer experience. So Marlon, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Glad to be here, Mark. Thank you for asking me.
Absolutely. So for those who don't know, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and most importantly, HTK and what you guys do?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so I founded HTK in 1996. So we were 25 years old this year. In my background, I'm an engineer. So I graduated from the University of Manchester in 1992 with a degree in computer science. So I'm a techie, and I still run the engineering product teams at HTK. I also look after the commercial side of the business. So I'm a busy guy. But yeah, we're a great, mature, but still entrepreneurial UK loyalty company.
Okay, great. When you look at the industry, you obviously are a thought leader, have a great deal of experience, both as an engineer and kind of a front-facing client expert. You know, how has customer experience changed and evolved in the recent months and years?
I think there's a lot more talk about it, which is, arguably a very good thing. But I think there's also, when I look on, LinkedIn and some of the forums, there's, exploded amount of conversation around CX. What it actually means. I think there's some confusion around that. I think there's some confusion around actually how important it is, and also where it sits. Is it a marketing thing? Is it a service thing? Does it fall under the finance division? Is it a chief exec thing? Or actually does it need some kind of new C-level representation on the board? I think there's a lot of conversation around that, which to me says that the business case for CX is actually quite hard to pin down. So I think lots of talk in the last 2 years, I'd say really. Let's say maybe some confusion still. Okay. I think people are still looking for good evidential case studies of what it means and how to do it.
Well, I think that's a really good point, right? So case studies, there's a significant amount of investment that goes into customer experience and customer loyalty from technology, from a strategy, from just an upkeep perspective. And so when you look at that, how does your organization communicate and demonstrate the importance of customer experience to the clients
you
work with to ensure that they are delivering accessible customer experiences to their end user customers?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fairly old school in the way I think about things, which is anything that you do for a client needs to demonstrate financial value or commercial value to the organization. So I think that's the number one thing that we say is anything we do for you has to be measurable. And a lot of our product stack is designed around that, whether that be from a Marcoms campaign to a different promotional offer to a broader strategy, actually measuring the benefit of that. And actually in loyalty, that's harder or easier said than done. But everything we do has to be measurable. I think in terms of what companies should do and think about, I think that lots of companies have CRM, and CRM has been around for a long, long time. And CX is not CRM. CX is around this important thing of putting smiles on customers' faces, the happiness factor. And very few organizations still can track happiness, sentiment, how are people feeling about it. So I think that's the first key bastion. And of course, their loyalty and affinity to your brand. And I think when you can track happiness and affinity and correlate that with financial value or predicted value, then you have a fighting chance of knowing who you need to retain and actually how much you invest in doing that. And very few CRM platforms consider those emotional metrics, and therefore campaign managers don't even think about it. So I think that's where loyalty platforms come in, because we allow people to blend those emotional factors with the rational ones to make better decisions around, in how much they invest in each customer relationship. So I think that's really key, because you've got to think about things in a different way. I think, when you start thinking around happiness, sentiment, and actually what you're going to do about that, that brings in another engineering challenge, that often those situations, those events need to be dealt with quickly and often in real time. As humans, we are irrational beasts almost entirely. We often don't think and act on rational data points, i.e. we jerk our knees and that's done. So I think when you start looking at, okay, an event's come in, I've measured that Joe isn't happy, he's a high value customer, he's his first experience with our brand. What are you going to do about it? Well, whatever you're going to do, you've got to do it now. Tomorrow's going to be too late. So next week. So, there's lots of things come together in terms of thinking about the situation and the challenge differently, and then obviously the tech investment to back it up. All of those things. It's not a quick conversation, Mark. So I'll stop there.
I think you touch on a lot of great points, like having the sentiment, being able to blend, the empathy and the human elements with technology is a big challenge. And when you look at that, driving the more contextualized messages, offers relevancy, and doing it in real time, how do you advise around that? Because there's a balance of technology and creating engagement, but also, as you mentioned, having that empathy, having that sentiment, having that human type feel to the offers and messages. How do you best advise clients to do that and drive memorable experiences?
I mean, it's a huge area. If you try and get your head around all of that, it becomes too complex to comprehend. I always start with saying to people, it's like anything. It's like sales. You've got to put yourself in the customer's shoes or the consumer's shoes. You've got to think about, if I was them, what's the conversation I'd want to have with the brand? What's the conversation the customer wants to have? In terms of, once you understand that, then you've got a chance of meeting their expectations, because obviously a lot of things these days are automated. So you've got to think about, how can we have enough data points to know, infer, guess, predict the conversation that the customer wants to have. Being very simplistic, that's about knowing when to sell and when to serve. And I think that's the thing. And I'm kind of a fan of customer journey mapping, because it looks at the end-to-end process in terms of where there are points where a customer might have heightened expectations of something happening next. We've talked about before, Mark, if I'm a consumer of broadband technology, I was about to come on an important call with Mark Johnson in the US to talk about loyalty. My broadband is down. I have an expectation of what's going to happen next. I'm going to phone the broadband company. They're going to answer the call quickly. They're going to recognize from my calling line identity who I am. They're going to recognize where my address, and that in this part of the UK, there's a broadband outage. They're going to say, Marlon, we're aware of the situation. We know you're going to talk to Mark soon. We're going to fix it. You're an important customer, a very handsome man, so you're the priority right now. It's going to be resolved in 5 minutes flat. If it's not done in 5 minutes flat, we'll call you back in 6. In fact, we'll call you back in 6. It's either fixed or we'll apologize. And let me tell you, that apology is going to be incredible, because we know you're going to renew with us this year, and yada, yada, yada. That's what I would love to happen. It never does. So again, you've got to start thinking, if you were that consumer, what would you expect? And actually, how close can we get to meeting an expectation? Because that's where loyalty is destroyed, in not meeting customer expectations. That scenario again, I phone up, I'm on in the IVR, in a queue for 30 minutes, but my call's important. I get through to somebody. Hello, how can I help you? They have no idea who's calling. It's Marlon Bowser. Okay, how can I help you, Mr. Bowser? What do you mean? Okay, my broadband is down. Why do you think I'm phoning you? Okay, Mr. Bowser, calm down. Let me look into that. Clatter, 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 clatter. And it goes on. And it's just, you get anxious, frustrated, annoyed, angry. At that point, those negative emotions destroy brand value. And the reverse is equally true. Positive emotions, feeling pleased, looked after, cared for, whatever, create financial value. That's the way you got to start thinking about things. And it's, I think, so customer journeys are great for doing that, but then you still got the question of, okay, well, how do we know when somebody is upset? How can we measure that? And the technology exists, Mark. We've known this for years. I'd be amazed if any call center right now is not employing technology to listen in on those calls, use speech recognition, speech technology to work out whether the customer is talking over the agent. That shows a sense of impatience, frustration, and actually what the tone of the voice is. Is it heightened? Is the person getting angry, screaming? All that kind of stuff, that's sentiment data, that's gold dust. That needs to feed straight back into CRM. And then question, what are you going to do with it? What's the context? What do we know about that caller? It's Mark Johnson. He's a rich and powerful man. He spends a lot of money with us. He's close to renewal. Or is his first experience? What does that mean? In that context of that event, what are we going to do? And you need to think through that on a kind of human person-to-person basis. What would you expect on their shoes? And then actually, how can you get the technology to automate that response, which might just be raising a ticket in Zendesk saying someone needs to phone Mark, he's not happy, it's the third time this week, let's phone him up. And actually changing your standard behavior. Why wait for the next email newsletter and hope he still wants to buy from you? Phone him up. Knowing what to do next is key.
No, and it's very interesting, and I think that begs another question: is how do you advise brands on how they should develop and design and execute these programs and processes to improve this experience? Because you talked about listening, you talked about kind of changing some mindsets internally. All of those play into the efficacy challenge that you have, but also understanding customers' expectations. Those can vary widely. So, do you have a couple best practices that you suggest to brands when they're looking to improve their customer experience? Is it, what are they?
Yeah, I mean, it's not really one size fits all. I think the main thing is don't rush. When you're looking in this whole area, it's very easy, and I've seen it, to spend time and money in the wrong places. And there's lots of advisors out there that will advise clients to spend money in the wrong places, let me tell you. So I'd say don't rush. I think it needs ownership internally, in terms of, if I was a large organization and I was interested in getting the customer experience right and really nailing that, then I'd have somebody internally who really understands what that means for our brand, for our customers, the state of the art, who's doing it really well. I think it needs internal ownership. I think a lot of companies trust agencies a bit too much with that stuff. I think I'd move from, there's lots of notions in kind of marketing and that kind of stuff around segments and personas, and you've got to move away from that thinking. You've got to move away from thinking about segments to thinking about the real-time context of any given situation for any given customer. It's the real-time thing. So I'd say, don't drag those preconceived notions about how to go through that journey. Don't bring them to the party. You've got to start with fresh thinking, because it's a new thing you're doing, but don't rush it. I think it's the key thing.
When you look at how things are evolving, where do you see customer loyalty, customer experience going over the next 6, 12 months, a year, a couple of years? In what ways do you think brands need to be more agile or can be more agile in meeting these evolving demands and expectations? Because the data sets continue to grow, first party data, zero party data, but the need for this simplicity that you speak of is growing to drive more advocates. And how can technology enable that?
Yeah, well, I think as we've talked about in the past, the main thing is don't start with the tech. For the love of all that's holy, don't start with the technology. Understand what you're trying to achieve, and I think have that clarity of vision. I think is the first thing. But I do think in terms of the tech and that agility, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, our view, and I've mentioned a lot on this call, you got to stop thinking about segments and start thinking about context. Get that consumer context. Loyalty programs are great for that because you have more ID in more places. So have a platform that can look at the consumer context at any given time. And that has to be then around what are we going to do about it? The real-time execution. I mean, there's a lot of real-time platforms now, and that's great. But once you have the context and ability for real-time execution of that context, then that's a great start. I think where things are going, Mark, and I'm probably going to anger the majority of your audience in a moment. I think because you know, at the end of the day, you know, computers are fast, accurate, and completely dumb, and human beings are slow. They get things wrong, but can be absolutely brilliant in what they do. And it's getting that combination right in terms of the human working with the tech. But I do think, having said that, that a lot of people are coming into marketing, a lot of people are coming into these roles that maybe are less, I'll be polite, are less experienced than they need to be. Maybe they don't quite know what they do. I think the average education of, you know, these days is lower than it's been for decades in terms of intelligence level. I believe that. There's a lot of dumb people in the world, and often they end up in senior positions or mid-market positions looking after marketing, comms. Our view, we have a product called Horizon Autopilot, and the reason I call it Autopilot, because it will run your business on autopilot. You know, if you're that person, that junior to mid-management marketer in charge of the comms strategy, in charge of CX, in charge of the data, and there's so much tech now, and there's so many considerations in terms of measuring sentiment, emotion, real time. You know, you've got different data points, you've got analytics, you've got ML, you've got all that kind of stuff to do. You log on to Autopilot, and Autopilot will say, Sally or Joe, if you do 5 things this week, do these 5 things. The data is telling us to do these things. Now, that might be because a certain audience is growing in size, shrinking in size, a certain promotion has not performed, a certain product line is selling really well, you've got some new advocates you need to recognize. You know, it might be that actually it's a certain time of year, we ran a certain promotion to a certain audience this same time last year with the same weather conditions, it performed brilliantly. Let's do the same. People have short memories, computers don't. So what you want is the computer to be prescriptive in telling you, advising you, even just going ahead and doing it, what to do that day, that week. And I think that's the next big thing, is investing in a platform that's going to get smart. It's going to get smart to work with a human, to bring the speed and the accuracy with the human brilliance to make great recommendations and predictions about what to do with confidence that the outcome will be positive.
No, you're right.
The person and the computer working in harmony to do a better job, make better decisions. This is where things will go in the next 5 years. I think where they'll go in the next year. So what we're working at HTK really hard on doing is helping people make smarter decisions and making their job easy. And I think when you have agility, it needs to be easy. It needs to be easy. It's, you know, it can't be complex because we have too many things to do.
Right.
So great context, you know, real time, make it easy, help out, recommend stuff to do, automate the heck out of it, and, you know, and measure everything. Did it work? Did it not work? There's a lot of moving parts to that, Mark, but, you know, this is why, you know, it's why engineers end up running companies that do this stuff, because it needs, you know, there's a lot of moving parts to it.
Well,
I say that to flatter myself. I'm not a genius by any means. People say I am, but I don't believe them.
Yeah. As always, I enjoyed the conversation, Marlon. Great having kind of that candid, kind of sincere discussion about where things are and the challenges. I think you address a lot of them, right? Technology, and we see that on our side. Brands don't have the bench strength internally usually to understand this technology, right? And they become over-reliant on the technology versus understanding the business opportunities, and that's a huge challenge. So being able to do those in concert, I think, at the same time is fundamental to success. But that's a huge challenge, especially when you can't truly assess the technology or can't assess the solution. And I think you're right. Never lead with tech, but so many people do lead with tech, right? This shiny object, it's like it's going to solve all their problems, because strategically the organizations may not have that bench strength to do what they need to do. And I think that's a very sanguine point that you put forth. I think it's brilliant, as you would say.
Well, good. That's the first thing we ever agreed on, Mark. You know that.
That is correct. All right. Well,
Yeah,
thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today. And everyone, thanks for listening. And join us back soon for another edition of Loyalty Live.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, Mark.